Anything to get into the camera.
Oh, you know damn well.
Publicity, boy. Publicity.
Very welcome to another Edentubber commemoration. On this very day, 44 years ago, shortly after midnight, an explosion occurred on this spot. It was a premature explosion which tragically killed the 5 occupants of the little cottage which stood on this very spot. The 5 courageous men who died were Michael Waters, aged 55, who owned the cottage; IRA volunteer Patrick Parle, aged 27, from Wexford Town; IRA volunteer George Keegan, aged 29, from Enniscorthy; IRA volunteer Paul Smith, aged just 19, from Bestbrook; and IRA volunteer Oliver Craven, aged also just 19, from Newry. Volunteers Paul Smith and Oliver Craven were buried along with their friend Michael Waters in St Patrick's Cemetery in Dundalk. The Wexford volunteers, Parle and Keegan, were brought home in procession to be buried in their native Wexford. Republicans have gathered here every year since to commemorate these brave soldiers and to salute their actions and to express solidarity with their comrades in the ongoing freedom struggle. I would like to extend a particular welcome to the members of their families present today. Nellie Waters is a sister-in-law of Michael Waters. Sean Waters, a nephew of Michael, is also present. Sally Cairns, a first cousin of Michael Waters, is here. Mary Loughran, who lives just across the road, is also here on the platform. Tommy Waters, a first cousin of Michael, is here. Brian Smith from Bestbrook, a brother of Paul's, is here. Stephen Keegan, a brother of George Keegan from Wexford, is here. And also present is Bob Keogh, who was a contemporary and a comrade of these men. And I would ask you to pay tribute, please, and to show appreciation for those family members. In commemorating those volunteers, we also bear in mind the sacrifices of our people, our activists and their supporters. And we support them and their actions. We know that while it's important to take the gun out of Irish politics, it's also fundamentally important to take British interference in Ireland out of Irish politics. And that's what these men were about, and that's what the current volunteers of Oglen na Herne are about, and that's what the Republican struggle is about. We'll continue with the laying of the wreaths. The first wreath will be laid on behalf of Oglen na Herne. A wreath on behalf of Louth Curlicanta Sinn Féin, and a wreath to be laid simultaneously on behalf of Newry Armagh Curlicanta Sinn Féin, and both those wreaths will be laid by the chairperson of Newry and Mourne District Council, Davy Hyland, and chairperson of Dundalk Urban District Council, Sean Channa. The Francis Jordan Common Sinn Féin, the Seamus Steele Sinn Féin Common Camloch, the Bennett Boyle Sinn Féin Common Balik, the Jim Lockery Sinn Féin Common Drummondhee, the Edentubber Commemoration Committee, the Waters, Riley and McGinnity Common, and there's a wreath to be laid by Bob Keogh on behalf of himself, family and comrades. And when you come forward, Bob, would you please remain on the platform? Parts will be complete without a lament from Donal O'Duffy on the pipes. come to the main part of our deliberations today. And our Speaker has been a lifelong member of the Republican movement. He was elected by the people of North Belfast, and in recent times has been daily at the Holy Cross School and attending with the children of that area and representing the parents and all associated with that protest. He's certainly no stranger in these parts. I was going to tell you that I met this fella for the first time in the H blocks of Longcash, and he was a good old devil to pass a few hours because we used to play chess. And I'll tell you the truth, he's the worst chess player in the world, but nevertheless he could still make it last. Would you please give a very hearty welcome for Gerry Kelly.
I'd like to thank our next Sinn Féin TD for that introduction. He needs to stop telling lies. He never beat me in chess in his life. Harja, it's more an honour event showing you, a couple of fuckler being a cuig dinner after your boss or a night show or sensation of hearing. I'm very honoured to be here to speak on Edentubber. We're here to pay homage to 5 Irishmen who lost their lives in the struggle for United Ireland. They died in November 1957 on this spot, yards away from an invisible border which they did not recognise and which indeed we don't recognise. As a matter of fact, if you walk the back roads and fields of this area, you wouldn't know if you were in the north or the south unless you were a local or an IRA volunteer trying to avoid either the Brits or the Gardaí. And I haven't had some experience at this. Sometimes we've had no difference which side you were caught on. The partition of this island was wrong in 1920. It was wrong when these IRA volunteers went out to end it in 1957, and it's wrong today. And let us be clear, we are out to end that partition and to get the British out of our country. I can't speak personally about Oliver Craven, Paul Smith, George Keegan, Patrick Powell, or Michael Waters. However, I have listened to Bob Keogh here, who was a sole survivor, a person who should have been here as well, and survived it. Anyone listening to him, talking of his comrades, could not help being affected by their loss. And I know on these occasions especially, we all have vivid memories of the close friends and comrades we have lost over the years. As Arthur said, I joined this struggle, I suppose, in earnest, after a bit of stone throwing, when I was 17 years of age. And it has been my privilege to have known many brave Irish men and women who have given their lives for a united Ireland and for the freedom of this country. From P.G. Campbell and Ballymurphy in 1972 to Anne-Marie Pettigrew, from Bobby Sands to Mairead Farrell to your own Brenton Burns and Brenton Moley in South Armagh, and unfortunately many in between. And we have buried our soldiers and we remember them in our hearts and in our actions. There's some cynicism, which I understand, around the recent long-awaited burials of Kevin Barry and his other 9 comrades by the government in Dublin. Despite that, I welcome the opportunity for our country and people to finally publicly honour our patriots, no matter what claims people may make in political speeches which have been made for them so many years later. The one thing I'm sure of, the one thing I've said in any commemoration since I was released in 1989, is that neither I nor anyone else can tell you what James Connolly, Kevin Barry, Bobby Sands, Mary Drum, who's being commemorated incidentally today in Belfast, or Brendan Moley or any other fallen comrade thinks of how this struggle is going. How could we? In struggle we lose many of our bravest hearts and bravest leaders. They died because they led from the front. Now the other thing that I can say for sure is that the duty of those who are left behind, those who live on, who survive, is to do their very best to move that struggle onwards. The duty of leadership is to do its best in the circumstances it faces. It can make easy decisions, but it must make hard decisions as well. There's not a Republican in this crowd, there is not a Republican in this country, and I have to say that includes myself, who has not gone through mental turmoil and heartache over the IRA initiative a few weeks ago. We dug deep emotionally and politically and are still coming to terms with it. And there is nothing wrong with that. But we have to remember the people who made this decision. The IRA's Army Council are comrades of ours. They were at the coalface of this military struggle for 30 years. These are people who knew all about the consequences of their decisions. They know and have a proven record when it comes to waging war on taking on the might of the British Army. And it is clear from their many decisions, many difficult decisions, including the most recent one, they also know how to be part of a peace strategy. We can be, and it is legitimate to be, critical of the IRA's initiative. But I wish to praise the IRA leadership for their bravery and for their commitment. Without them, we would not be where we are today. They were faced with a dilemma. The peace process was on the verge of collapse. Those opposed to the peace process were using the IRA's guns as an excuse not to engage with Republicans, as an excuse to prevent the change that they were afraid to face. They ran us all perilously close to the edge of the cliff. Had the IRA not acted as they did, then we would have been over the cliff. The peace process would have been in free fall. Such a situation would have suited the Unionist wreckers and those in the British establishment, the securocrats, who have been trying for years to provoke the IRA and also to defeat them. The IRA acted to save the peace process. No one else was going to do it. Tony Blair wasn't going to do it. Bertie Ahern wasn't going to do it. David Trimble certainly wasn't going to do it. But the IRA did do it, and fair play to them. They had the courage of their commitments, and I applaud them for their boldness and decisive leadership. They took an issue which our opponents were trying to use to beat Republicans over the head with at home and internationally, and gave it straight back to them. Let us see what the British government is going to do to drive this process forward. Let's see their actions in demilitarising the whole of the 6 counties. Let's see the colour of their money on policing amendments, on emergency legislation, etc. People want to know what Bertie Ahern is going to do about northern representation in the Oireachtas. What will happen to people on the run? How long will the Castlereagh political prisoners have to wait to get released? What will TDs and government ministers, when will TDs and government ministers walk with the children of the Holy Cross School? Now I know that there are Republicans out there questioning whether the peace process is working or worth it. There are those wondering if our peace strategy is worth the effort. This is understandable. We are standing on the most militarised border in Europe. The dismantling of 2 military watchtowers when many others remained, and in fact the 2 can be replaced in days, does not impress the people of South Armagh. People in Armagh, Tyrone, Fermanagh know that military patrolling has actually increased in many areas. People with a generation of experience in Belfast and Derry are still looking at cityscapes blighted with battle-green military camps and observation posts. The parents of Holy Cross or the besieged Catholics in North Belfast are still facing the same RUC men who beat them off the streets and raided and wrecked their homes and attacked them with plastic bullets. They can call themselves PSNI or Peter Mandelson's mighty marauders if they want. The fact is that we do not have a new policing service as agreed by all the parties to the Good Friday Agreement. We still have the RUC under another title. While we are on the subject of policing, let me clarify a few things about Sinn Féin's attitude to the current Police Act and Policing Board. I have listened to members of the SDLP and others speaking about our intentions. Let me speak about them. Let me be clear about our attitude to all of this. Firstly, people are entitled to a police service they can support and join in. In particular, the Nationalist and Republican people of the 6 counties require such a service, given that they have been on the receiving end of the violence of the RUC since that force was set up in the 1920s. What is currently on offer is not a new beginning to policing, as was promised in the Good Friday Agreement. What we have is the RUC repackaged, the RUC with a new name. What we have is a police force which has human rights abusers in it from top to bottom, a force with those still in it who colluded with loyalists to kill our people and who themselves killed our people, a force which cannot and will not investigate the killings of Pat Finucane or Rosemary Nelson or Robert Hamill or many others. A force that is armed to the teeth with guns and plastic bullets, which they are more than ready to use. A force that is controlled by the special branch, who continue to wage a dirty war against the nationalist people. This is the same special branch that ran the RUC for 30 years. I want to hear from the hierarchy of the Catholic Church and from the RUC and from the SDLP, Freudian slip. How can they justify calling on people to join this discredited force? For our part in Sinn Féin, we are not biding our time. We are not casually waiting to see how the police board functions before joining it. We already know. We already know that under the Police Act what powers the police board have. That is why we refuse to go on it. It is a toothless tiger. It cannot change the legislation to prevent the veto of Ronnie Flanagan or John Reid over any of its decisions. The ironic thing is that the SDLP and the Catholic Church and the Irish government agree that we need amending legislation, but they are collectively asking Republicans and nationalists who have suffered at the hands of British rule over generations to trust the British to make it all right. We are not joining the policing boards, and we are and will vigorously campaign against any Republican or nationalist making the mistake of joining a reconstituted RUC. We're trying to get the police service right. The negotiations to get it right are far from over. We will continue to negotiate till it is put right. Certain unionists are crowing about the IRA and Republicans that they've moved because of pressure. They are making a huge mistake if that is their analysis. This struggle for independence, for a united Ireland, has gone through a number of phases. But a new phase does not mean we have a new analysis or strategy. As Republicans, we have identified the British military and political occupation of part of this country as being the source of all our political ills. That analysis is correct and will withstand anyone critically examining it. But I do accept that the unionist people have rights, just as you and I have rights. And we have to work with them to ensure that everyone's rights are secured. Let it be said, we continue to dialogue and engage with unionists, despite the hundreds of bomb attacks on Catholics by loyalists and the dozens of Catholic homes that have been wrecked. We have done it despite the muted condemnation of those attacks by unionists and loyalist politicians. We have worked hard at dialogue despite the despicable blockade of 40 11-year-old Catholic schoolgirls at Holy Cross School and their parents by the Glenbryn residents. We persist despite the fact that loyalist and unionist politicians defend those actions and bigotry of many Glenbryn residents on that blockade. Why do Republicans persist and persevere? Why do Republicans take risks and initiatives in good times and bad? Because we have a vision of the future and we have a strategy to achieve that vision of a future as equals in a united Ireland. The Good Friday Agreement, while not a Republican document, fitted into that strategy. The Good Friday Agreement, fully functioning and without preconditions, is a giant step in the guarantee to us all that people's rights will not only be accepted, but they will be respected and safeguarded. The Good Friday Agreement, fully functioning without preconditions, can be legitimately used by Republicans. Indeed, it must be used by Republicans to move our struggle for a united Ireland forward. It is no coincidence that the first part of the agreement that the Unionists moved to disrupt was the All-Ireland part. It is the dynamic for change they are trying to slow down. On an island this small, it doesn't make sense to have two education ministers, two health ministers, two ministers in charge of the economy, two agricultural ministers, etc. There's obvious scope for harmonisation and mutual cooperation on a whole range of issues, north and south. Only those who hanker back to the bad old days of unionist domination are opposed to such change. The IRA's initiative, a couple of weeks ago, has opened up an entirely new political situation, and we intend not only to fast-track the work of the All-Ireland Ministerial Council, but also to expand its areas of responsibility. And if Republicans, when all the jargon's put aside, when all the thought process arguments are put aside, within yourself, walking about your business, if you want a rule of thumb of how well we're doing, then perhaps the way to do it is to compare the last 5 years with the previous 5 years. Now, while elections are far from the only method of measuring political strength, they are certainly the most scientific one. the most proven one. Over the last 8 elections, we have increased our vote in the 6 counties to the point that we are now the largest nationalist political party. And if truth be told, we're probably 4 years ahead of ourselves. We didn't expect to get to that point, maybe on the next election. In the 26 counties, from a very low base.
Of the fallen men here and Bob Keogh for coming out. Hopefully next year we will be back in even greater numbers. There is also a function following immediately on the dispersal of this commemoration in the Ravensdale House. Music is by Shanos. It should be a good afternoon of cracking entertainment and an opportunity for people to have a chat. We will now reform up and the colour party will lead us back with the bands to the Ravensdale House. Goramilya Mahagaf Galera.
Oh, sorry.